Hello and welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. JSW Paints is set to acquire Akzo Nobel's India business by shelling out 9,400 crore rupees. The deal will make JSW the fourth largest player in the highly competitive paints industry. CNBC-TV18 reported last month the deal will be signed by the end of June. Axis Bank executive Rajiv Anand leads the race to become the next CEO of IndusInd Bank. Sources say Anup Saha of Bajaj Finance and Rahul Shukla of HDFC Bank are also in the running. That's an exclusive. The Sensex and Nifty gained 2% this week after a strong rally on Friday. The Nifty is now just over 2% away from record highs. Crude oil prices down 10% this week, the biggest five-day decline in 2 years. US and China agree on a trade deal framework. Beijing will allow rare earth exports. After a review, US will ease the rules restricting high-tech exports to China.
But we're having some great deals. We have one coming up, maybe with India, very big one, where we're going to open up India.
President Trump teases a big trade deal with India ahead of the 9th July tariff deadline, but the Indian government sources say no consensus yet on steel, agriculture and automobile tariffs. India's chief negotiator Rajesh Agarwal is in the US for talks. India reports a current account surplus in 4 quarters of more than $13 billion. This helps narrow the deficit for the full year to just over $23 billion, which is 0.6% of GDP. The Union Cabinet likely to have waived spectrum dues worth 6 lakh crore rupees. Sources say the waiver will only apply to government departments like defence, railways and space. No waiver for PSUs and private players. The 12,500 crore rupee HDB Financial IPO closes with bids amounting to 17 times the total shares on offer. This is the largest NBFC IPO to date and the second most subscribed issue with a total size in excess of 10,000 crore rupees. Fintech unicorn Pine Labs files for an IPO worth 2,600 crore rupees. Existing investors, including PayPal and MasterCard, will offload stake in the company, which eyes a valuation of $6 billion. Tata Power plans to expand electricity distribution in Maharashtra, seeks licenses across key growth regions, including parts of Mumbai, Pune and Nasik. Well, let's go straight to the market action this Friday evening. Benchmark indices recording gains for the second straight week. The Sensex and the Nifty ending the week 2% higher. In fact, the broader markets outperformed, with the Nifty small cap index rising over 2% for the week. The Nifty ending above 25,637 today, a gain of about 2%. And it's 2% away from a record high. The Nifty Bank, meanwhile, hitting a fresh record high, 0.5% higher. That's the story for it today. That is a record-breaking day on Dalal Street and also a record-breaking day on Wall Street. Both the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq had hit record highs at opening bell. The easing of trade tensions between US and China clearly boosting sentiment. Statements from Federal Reserve member Kashkari hinting at rate cuts from September, also providing ammo to the bulls. So global markets, including India, up and away. From equities to the commodity markets, prices of crude oil have fallen over 10% this week, registering the worst decline in over 2 years. Now, fears of supply disruptions in the Middle East have clearly eased. However, oil prices marginally corrected today due to higher fuel demand in the US. The big corporate story. We told you first, and it is now official. JSW Paints is set to acquire Akzo Nobel's India business in a deal worth 9,400 crore rupees. The deal will make JSW the fourth largest player in the highly competitive paints industry. Shares of Akzo Nobel India surging after JSW announced an open offer at a 16% premium. Rachna, who broke the story, joins us now with more. Rachna, finally, the deal is done.
It is a CNBC-TV18 news break confirmed. JSW Paints has officially sealed the deal to acquire a 74.76% stake in Akzo Nobel India. Now, this is for 9,400 crore rupees at 2,762 rupees per share. That's a 16% discount to market price, as we had indicated earlier. Now, sources have told CNBC-TV18 that the deal would be funded through 2 ways. First, where 2,000 crore rupees would be coming in equity from the Jindal family, backed by stake and asset sales, while the remaining 7,000 crore rupees will be in form of debt and structured credit, including financing from global institutions. But before the deal can go through, there are a few crucial steps left, starting with a mandatory open offer. Under SEBI rules, any acquirer picking up more than 25% stake in a listed company has to make an open offer to public shareholders. In this case, JSW Paints will offer to buy up to 26% more of Akzo Nobel India at 3,417 rupees per share. That's a significant premium to current market price. Now, post-merger, JSW Paints will have a production capacity between 4,70,000 to 5,20,000 KL per annum, blending JSW Paints' Vasant and Vijayanagar units with Akzo Nobel's plants in Gwalior, Bangalore, Mohali and Hyderabad. The employee headcount is also expected to be around 3,500 people and an estimated revenue of over 5,000 crore rupees in 2025. This is well in line with their FY26 growth targets. Now, with a 9 to 10% share in the decorative paints market and becoming the second largest in industrial coatings, this move makes JSW Paints the new number 4 player in India's paint landscape. A transformative step and a bold bet by Parth Jindal to build what he calls the paint company of the future. But it was earlier this year in Davos where he had said that he would do anything to get this deal. Here's what he said.
I think there's no choice. If JSW and the ambitions we've shown that we want to be a top 3 player in whichever sector we play in, if I have to do that, then I have to give it everything that I've got for Akzo.
How will you fund it?
It's going to be a mix of the family investing, and private equity.
Well, that's Parth Jindal speaking to me in Davos about going after Akzo Nobel, and today the deal finally done. Paint stocks traded with gains after the announcement of the deal. So how does this change the dynamics for the sector, which is already fairly competitive? Mangalam is standing by with more. Mangalam.
Let's start with, JSW Paints acquiring Akzo Nobel at close to around 2,700 rupees per share for the promoter stake. 3,417 rupees per share is what they've allowed for an open offer as well. But on Akzo Nobel, they're the 4th largest paint company in India. They're the makers of Dulux paints, and nearly 35% of their revenue comes in from decorative business as well. They have a high market share in the premium end of segment. Whereas JSW Paints, if you look at it, they've been in the market for over 6 years. FY24 is when they crossed that 2,000 crore revenue mark. FY25, they had a target of 3,000 crores. In FY26, 5,000 crores. All of this organically. Remember, 60% of their revenue comes in from intergroup business. So that's something we'll have to talk. If you look at the paint industry, the top 2 players have over 50% market share. Asian Paints last year did over 34,000 crores in terms of revenue. Berger, 11,500 crores. Kansai, 7,800 crores. Akzo Nobel stands in here. Add another 2,000 crores of JSW Paints, it becomes a 6,000 crore player on the whole. The paint industry worth nearly 80,000 crores right now. 65,000 crores is organized, expected to grow anywhere between 12 to 13%, with the market share of top 2 players being over 50%, and that's what the conglomerates are eyeing. What is it that helps in, the business to grow? Birla Opus launched last year itself. They have high single-digit market cap and market share rather, and 900 to 1,200 crore in terms of quarterly run rate. Can they continue this business or not? They have a stated target of 10,000 crores in terms of revenue and EBITDA break-even by year 3 of complete operations. What is it that the incumbents will need to do? Focus on distribution, brand, tinting machines, and capacity. Capacity, the least of them all. First 3 is most important. What everyone will be looking at, how the incumbents and disruptors expand, whether there would be margin contraction in the industry or not, and eventually valuation multiples. Are we likely to see another derating once this disruption comes by or not? All of that depends on what Akzo Nobel and JSW together do. We'll be tracking growth for JSW Paints along with Akzo Nobel, ex their own group, revenues. Secondly, how much more will they invest in capacity, branding and distribution? And thirdly, from a listed company standpoint, will they list JSW Paints business via reverse merger, or will there be an IPO for JSW Paints itself or not? Paint stocks have seen a correction of almost 30-35% from the peak. Asian Paints at some point was trading over 60 times, now at 45 times. Berger Paints 40 times. So there has been one leg of valuation, multiple derating that has taken place.
Changes much, because these 2 players, as you rightly said, have been there in India already. Both JSW and Akzo have been operating in this market. We are more or less aware of their strengths and weaknesses, and we know what they are doing in the marketplace. So it's just a change of hands, possibly a change in the management style that it is operating in. So from that perspective, there might be some small changes, but overall in the industry nothing changes much. What does happen is that there is a consolidation which is happening now. So there are now, 5 players in the industry. The top 2, Asian and Berger, remains. The third, fourth, and fifth position is up for grabs, and that's where the competition will be intensifying a bit, between Birla, JSW plus Akzo and Kansai.
Well, that's Berger Paints commenting on what the JSW Akzo Nobel deal could mean for the paints market. But here's a CNBC-TV18 exclusive. Axis Bank's Deputy Managing Director Rajiv Anand is a strong contender to take over as IndusInd Bank CEO. Sources tell us that 2 other finance executives are also in the reckoning. Ritu's here with more details. Ritu, so Rajiv Anand could be a potential CEO candidate as far as IndusInd Bank is concerned. Who are the others?
We do understand that there are 3 strong contenders that have emerged that are being actively considered by the board as we speak. Rajiv Anand from Axis Bank, Anup Saha from Bajaj Finance, and Rahul Shukla from HDFC Bank. Let's start with Rajiv Anand, where he's got more than 35 years of experience in financial services. He's been with the Axis Group since 2009 and on the board of the bank since 2013. And as the deputy MD, he led the wholesale and digital banking portfolio. But here's the key detail. He has announced his retirement from Axis Bank, and come early August, he's going to step down, and that will make him available to take charge at IndusInd if he is shortlisted. But our sources also point out that he is indeed a strong contender for the job. Next, Anup Saha, again 32 years of experience, 25 in financial services, including 14 years at ICICI Bank. He's led everything from credit cards to mortgages, auto loans and structured finance. And very recently, he was elevated to the position of MD at Bajaj Finance, which is again a sign of trust that he commands. And finally, Rahul Shukla, 30 years of experience. He began his career at Citibank and then joined HDFC Bank in 2018, where he oversaw the corporate banking portfolio and was now heading the commercial and rural banking division. Currently, he is on sabbatical, but very much in the mix. So, all these 3 names are under consideration, but our sources tell us the board is looking more keenly at Rajiv Anand and Anup Saha. Now, remember, the Reserve Bank of India has asked the board to submit final names by June 30th. And while the board has held informal discussions with RBI, no names have been submitted formally just yet. Typically, it takes RBI anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks, sometimes longer, to approve the bank CEO name. But this is not your usual case. We've seen a string of top-level exits after the multiple accounting lapses and irregularities that came to light. And so our sources indicate this particular appointment, could be fast-tracked.
All right, Ritu, many thanks for joining us. Now, HDB Financial's 12,500 crore rupee IPO closed today with strong demand. The issue was fully subscribed yesterday and today. The subscription was more than 17-fold. 13 crore shares were on offer and the company received bids amounting to 217 crore shares. This is India's largest NBFC IPO to date. It also is the second most subscribed among offers in excess of 10,000 crore rupees. The SBI card IPO was subscribed more than 27 times, followed by HDB Financial at 17 times. Coal India at 15 times. Fintech unicorn Pine Labs gearing up to go public. The company has filed papers with SEBI for a 2,600 crore rupee initial public offer, eyeing a valuation of $6 billion. Existing investors like PayPal, MasterCard and Peak 15 will sell shares in the IPO. Now, India has reported a current account surplus for the first time in 4 quarters. According to the RBI data, the surplus in Q4 stood at more than $13 billion. This is much higher than a CNBC-TV18 poll, which expected a surplus of less than $10 billion. In the same quarter a year ago, the surplus was less than $5 billion. Now, this surplus has helped narrow the current account deficit for the full year to just over $23 billion, which is equal to 0.6% of GDP. The big global story: China has confirmed the details of a trade framework with the US that seeks to allow rare earth exports and the easing of tech restrictions. Beijing says it will allow the export of rare earth magnets to the US after a review. On the other hand, the US will cancel a range of existing restrictive measures imposed against Beijing, including tech exports. With this, both nations have agreed to implement the framework they agreed to in Geneva a couple of months ago. President Trump confirmed the agreement with China. He also teased a big trade deal with India, which he claimed will open up the country. All of this ahead of the July 9 deadline, when the 26% reciprocal tariffs on India are scheduled to kick in.
But we're not going to make deals with everybody. Some we're just going to send them a letter, say, thank you very much. You're going to pay 25, 35, 45%. That's the easy way to do it. And my people don't want to do it that way. They want to do some of it, but they want to make more deals than I would do. but we're having some great deals. We have one coming up, maybe with India, very big one, where we're going to open up India. In the China deal, we're starting to open up China, things that never really could have happened. And the relationship with every country has been very good.
Well, President Trump, and even as the U.S. president teases a big trade deal with India, government sources say some hurdles remain. There is no consensus yet on steel, agriculture and automobile tariffs. Parikshit is standing by with the details. Parikshit, our chief negotiator, is currently in the U.S. to take the talks forward. What are you picking up? What continue to be the hurdles in getting a deal done?
India and US are discussing an early harvest deal which will cover $100 to $150 billion worth of goods traded between the two nations. But there is no agreement on critical areas just yet, and India's top negotiator Rajesh Agarwal is visiting United States again for talks. India and the United States are yet to come to an agreement on steel, agriculture and automobile tariffs. Sources say the US-India early harvest deal cannot and won't be a one-way street because both sides will have to win. Where are things stuck? Well, India wants an exemption from 50% duty on steel imports imposed by the United States. But America is unlikely to give a concession to India here. Differences still remain on tariffs on automobile components. Also, US wants access not just for American cars, but large, heavy-duty trucks as well. US wants more access in agriculture and dairy, but India cannot allow US dairy and meat products as American farmers use blood meal as food supplement for livestock. India is also unlikely to allow any genetically modified crops into the country. The US is likely to maintain a 10% baseline tariff on Indian exports even if a deal happens. And if that is the scenario, India would impose a 10% tariff on American goods as well. India also wants tariffs on labour-intensive products to be reduced to zero. Government sources believe that there will be at least 100 product lines where tariffs may be reduced to low single digits or even zero. United States may impose zero tariffs on imports of some labour-intensive goods from India. This may be through a fixed quota of goods to be imported at lower tariffs and anything beyond that to be subjected to higher tariffs. US and India are looking to conclude an early trade deal before the 9th of July. Indian officials have said that there will be no compromise on national interest and the country is not desperate for a trade deal. Experts have said that India should not be worried about reciprocal tariffs in case a deal is not struck before the 9th of July.
Well, speaking of that 9th of July deal, Parikshit, the White House indicated that President Trump could extend the July 9 tariff deadline. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said the date is not critical and could be extended at the president's discretion. Take a look.
The deadline is not critical. The president can simply provide these countries with a deal if they refuse to make us one by the deadline, and that means the president can pick a reciprocal tariff rate that he believes is advantageous for the United States and for the American worker, and he will continue to do that.
And while the Defense Secretary hinted at an extension, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick insisted that July 9th will be the deadline for reciprocal tariffs to kick in. Some mixed messages coming in from the White House. Meanwhile, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, says the bloc is prepared if trade negotiations with the U.S. break down. She maintained that Europe will defend its interests if a satisfactory agreement is not reached.
Today, we received the latest US document for further negotiations. We are assessing it as we speak right now. So our message today is clear. We are ready for a deal. At the same time, we are preparing for the possibility that no satisfactory agreement is reached. This is why we consulted on a rebalancing list. And we will defend the European interest as needed. In short, all options remain on the table.
Well, that's Ursula von der Leyen. And Martin Wolf, the chief economic commentator at the Financial Times, believes India may not attract more investments just because US tariffs on China could be higher. Speaking exclusively to CNBC-TV18, Wolf said India should not rely on tariff privileges and focus on improving competitiveness. He also believes India should offer the same trade to US and the global south to establish itself as a credible partner.
If you have the benefit of discrimination in your favor, that's obviously good for you. So potentially this gives India an opportunity to expand its exports of products which compete with what other developing countries can supply, and make it a more attractive base for foreign direct investment, particularly by US firms. And then, of course, the other thing is they have to say to themselves, okay, we've seen all this instability in trade policy. If we're going to set up a new factory, that's a big investment. We will need 5 to 10 years to get it back. So we don't need to know just, do we have the preference today? We have to know, how long will it last? It, I think, could, for instance, say, and it's one of my particular proposal, okay, we will have deals with the US, but any deal we offer the US, we'll offer to everybody. We are going to continue with non-discrimination. We are a friendly country. We're not going to privilege the US over Europe or over Africa or anywhere else.
Well, that's Martin Wolf there. Now, the US Embassy in India has cautioned visa applicants against omitting social media information, saying it could lead to visa denial and future ineligibility. Now, social media post by the embassy reminds visa applicants that they have to list their social media handles used in the last 5 years. The US State Department has referred to each visa adjudication as a national security decision. Applicants for student and exchange visas have also been asked to make their social media profiles public for vetting. Up next on India Business Hour, Union Cabinet is likely to have waived spectrum dues worth 6 lakh crore rupees, but not for PSUs or for private players. That and more when we return. Catch all of CNBC-TV18's news and updates on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, X and Jio Hotstar. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman met with the heads of public sector banks today, urging bankers to lend more and step up credit momentum. Government wants PSU banks to report higher credit growth this fiscal compared to the last year. The nudge from the government to lend more comes after the RBI asked all banks to ensure the 50 basis point rate cut was passed on to consumers. Market regulator SEBI has allowed Jio BlackRock Broking to commence operations as a brokerage firm in India. The broking entity's parent company is a joint venture between Jio Financial Services Limited and BlackRock Inc. Jio Financial shares surging following the news, closing with gains of 4%. Tata Power planning to expand electricity distribution across Maharashtra. The company has sought licenses across key growth regions, including parts of Mumbai, Pune and Nasik. Tata Power expects its consumer base will rise to 15 million if the license is approved. This comes days after Torrent Power received the initial approval for distribution in Maharashtra. Now, the Union Cabinet is likely to have waived spectrum dues worth 6 lakh crore rupees. Sources say the waiver will only apply to government departments like the Defence Department, Railways and Space. Ashmit is standing by with the details. So, Ashmit, just to be clear, there's no waiver even for PSUs. Forget private sector players, that's another story altogether, but not even PSUs.
Well, just the term spectrum waiver, it sparks a lot of interest. But again, that's an important clarification that you gave, that this is not for PSUs, this is not for private players. This waiver that has come from the cabinet, what sources tell us, is strictly and strictly for only government departments. Bear in mind, departments such as the likes of Defence, Space, INB, Railway are allocated spectrum on an administrative basis for their operations, for their communication requirements. The spectrum is allocated by the DOT, and therefore, as a result, they're required to pay the spectrum dues in question. Now, these dues date back to early 2000s and because of non-payment had swelled on account of interest, on account of penalty components compounding over the very many years, swelled to north of 6 lakh crore rupees. And that is the question that was put before the cabinet. One government department having to pay the other. The wisdom was seen by the cabinet that given that this is a situation where the left hand appears to be paying the right, the wisdom was seen by the cabinet to grant a waiver. This waiver, again, to clarify, is meant for these government departments for their spectrum dues on account of their interest and penalty components. Now we're given to understand that after this relaxation, they'll only be required to pay a minimal interest burden as well as the principal component. That is the main charge that has now been approved by the cabinet. But again, to reiterate, this is purely and purely for government departments, the likes of Defence, Space, Railways and INB, not for PSUs and definitely not for private players.
All right, Ashwin, many thanks. In international news, tension still running high, even as the ceasefire between Iran and Israel continues to hold. Israel's defense minister has admitted that the military was actively planning to assassinate Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, but did not find a viable opportunity. Iran's Khamenei has hit out at US President Trump for his comments that Iran must surrender. Khamenei has said the statement was too big to come out of the US president's mouth. Meanwhile, Iranian authorities have launched a major domestic crackdown from house to house, searching and deploying Revolutionary Guards in schools. Iran has also carried out multiple arrests and execution of people who they suspect might be working for Israel's intelligence agencies. India successfully evacuated more than 4,400 people from conflict-hit Iran and Israel under Operation Sindhu. These include Indian nationals and some Nepali and Sri Lankan citizens. As the Ministry of External Affairs, the operation, which was launched on the 18th of June, involved 19 special flights. 173 Indian nationals arrived in Delhi from Iran last night. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has met Chinese counterpart Admiral Dong Jun on the sidelines of the SCO Defence Ministers' meeting. The Defence Minister stressed the need for both the nations to sustain a positive momentum and improve bilateral relations. He also said that India and China should avoid adding new complexities in the ties. Meanwhile, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar backed Defence Minister Rajnath Singh's refusal to sign the SCO joint document. He said the organisation was formed with the objective of fighting terrorism, but there was no reference to terrorism in the communique.
This Shanghai Cooperation Organization, its objective was to fight terrorism. Okay? So this organization exists to fight terrorism. So what happened was, when Rajnathji went for a defense ministers meeting and there was a discussion on the outcome document, one country, you can guess which one country said that no, we do not want a reference to that.
Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez have arrived in Venice for their wedding. The wedding venue was moved to an isolated, less accessible part of the city to prevent the risk of protests, estimated to cost up to $56 million. The guest list includes Leonardo DiCaprio, Kim Kardashian, Ivanka Trump, and elephant legend Tom Brady. Athletes and royalty, music icons like Elton John, Usher and Lady Gaga are also set to appear. And before we wrap, Anna Wintour has stepped down as the editor-in-chief of American Vogue magazine after 37 years. The 75-year-old British fashion icon, who transformed the magazine into a global style magnet, will take up the role of global editorial director and chief content officer at sister company Condé Nast. Known for her signature bob and sunglasses, Wintour's legacy includes leading the Met Gala since 1995 and reshaping Vogue magazine. Well, it is the end of an era there, with Anna Wintour stepping down as the head of Vogue. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. Thanks very much for watching. The news will continue right here on CNBC-TV18. Remember to log on to CNBC-TV18 Access. Visit us on CNBC-TV18 Prime. From all of us here, have a great weekend.